have hopefully painted a complete view of who Ayn Rand was and her philosophy called Objectivism. The reason why I wanted to create this video series was to address how an atheist could come up with the philosophy that ascribed meaning and purpose without a belief in a higher power. I want to make it clear that Ayn Rand wasn't a selfish individual for the sake of being selfish, but because she only cared about rational self-interest. She knew that there wasn't an afterlife, and therefore in her mind, there wasn't a reason to try and cooperate with people that ended up with her getting less than what was due. As long as the exchange was fair and equal, she didn't care. If she had to sacrifice anything without obtaining something of equal value, then it wasn't worth the effort. Some of Objectivism's tenets I do agree with. I believe that reality exists beyond one's own consciousness. When a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound? Just because nothing may be around to receive and interpret the sound waves doesn't mean that it doesn't make a sound. The tree still falls, and all the rules of the universe still act upon the tree falling even without an observer. I do believe humans have contact with reality through sense perception, and that one can obtain knowledge through that perception. Whether or not this knowledge is true is a different subject. Most of Objectivism tenets I do disagree with. While I believe that one can sense reality through their senses, I do not trust everyone's senses on face value. Our senses can be deceived. With so much information being thrown at our brains, it's almost impossible for us to dissect every bit that comes into our minds. Our minds also like to fill in the gaps of information that we may have not received. This causes us to have faulty knowledge. Have you ever seen the rubber hand experiment?
Okay, that's weird. That's really weird.
Tell me when you're there.
Yeah, I feel it.
Feel it?
Yeah.
Don't move.
Oh no. Oh no. No! No, no, no! Dude! What the hell was that? Yes!
Sorry, are you okay?
Ricky. You don't need to do that with me ever again.
Alright, take a seat right here. And you're gonna put your hands on the table with your left hand resting on the left side of this. I'm gonna drape this over you.
It feels like my hand's right in front of me.
Okay. Okay, then this is gonna be weird, but you trust me, right?
Do I trust you? No. What do you... Whoa, no, stop. No, dude, put the... No! Oh, Jesus! Are you...
You okay?
Dude, why...
Take a breath. And let me know again when that's feeling like your hand.
Okay, it's starting to feel like it's my hand.
Stay there. Stay there.
What are you doing? Ah! Oh, Jesus!
It's okay?
Yeah.
You okay?
I'm fine, I'm just...
Alright.
It's really weird.
What does it feel like?
I'm not sure. I'm starting to feel like that's my hand.
Are you?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Oh my gosh, what are you gonna do?
Oh, God.
Oh no. Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Oh my god! Whoa, this is weird. Okay, this is like, I don't know, this is like Inception or something.
So this feels like your hand?
Yep.
Yes?
Yeah.
Do you trust me?
I trust you
Okay.
enough.
Look.
No.
Look.
No,
Look.
dude, I'm like...
Alright, wait. Deep breaths. Deep breaths. Let me know when you're back in that space, when that feels like your hand. Let me know when you're there.
Okay.
Are you there?
I'm there.
Okay.
Totally
Okay.
there. This doesn't feel okay, man. Like...
The brain actually causes people to feel real pain when the rubber hand is hit. It is confused as to which is the real hand and reacts to the information it receives. Our auditory cortex is incredibly faulty as well.
This is what the auditory cortex in your brain looks like if it was made out of paper and had a cute little face. Your auditory cortex seems well-meaning, but it can be pretty deceptive. Our hearing plays tricks on us all the time, and it's not your ears that are to blame. And it's not your ears that are to blame. Not your ears that are to blame. Not your ears, 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 not your ears. When you repeat a phrase over and over and over, it begins to sound like a song. Researchers call this the speech-to-song illusion. The repetition of words tricks us into hearing a rhythm and thinking it's musical. And when you think you're hearing a song, your brain works even harder to detect musical patterns and process the pitch. Speaking of pitch, I'm going to play you some two-tone computer-generated patterns, and I want you to tell me if they're ascending or descending. What did you think? To me, it sounds like up, down, down. But you may have heard a completely different pattern. It's kind of like the dress of sound. No one can quite agree if the tones are moving up or down. Really, it's neither. So maybe that was a misleading question. This illusion is called the tritone paradox. The tones are half an octave apart, also called a tritone, and they're computer generated to be a specific note, say a C and an F, but they're not in a specific octave. What's weirder is that people are internally consistent with the direction they hear certain note patterns moving. If you hear, say, C and F sharp as ascending, you'll continue to think that it's ascending when you hear it in the future, no matter what octave either of those notes are generated in. The tritone paradox was discovered by American psychologist Diana Deutsch in 1986, and it's been confusing people ever since. In one study, she found that more participants from California heard a pattern as ascending, and more from the south of England heard it as descending. Deutsch suggests the speech patterns of our childhood shape the way our brain maps musical notes. If you feel like you're disagreeing with everyone about the pattern of these tones, studies show that you're more likely to hear the same pattern as your mum. Seriously, send this to her. And then listen to these words. What do you hear? Maybe no way? Or bueno? Or depending on how you're feeling, Rogaine? Love me? This phantom word illusion is best experienced in front of two speakers. It sounds like each speaker is producing a different word. But why? So the three bones in your middle ear are the three smallest in your body. Their job is to translate the energy of sound waves to the inner ear, which then transmits electrical impulses through the auditory nerve into the brain. Most of the time, your auditory cortex does its job and we can communicate. Hey. But remember how it can be deceptive? Your brain is constantly trying to find meaning in things. The phantom words are individual syllables coming out of different speakers. But like with a lot of audio illusions, certain brainwaves encode the sound in your brain as if it's in one piece. You use those individual sounds to construct lots of different words. Your brain loves to fill in the gaps. Sorry, your brain loves to fill in the gaps. John, we're almost finished. Your brain loves to fill in the gaps.
Look, it's okay, I just cut in a cough and I cut out a little bit of another word. Your brain loves to fill in the gaps.
Huh, the phoneme restoration effect. Did you notice? See you next Thursday.
Because of these instances, I cannot trust my senses by themselves. Look at the performance of magic. Its entire premise is based upon tricking your senses. The best way I can come to know what is true when it comes to my senses is to have the consensus of many people around me verify what just happened. Even then, that has problems. Groups can manufacture false narratives based upon what they say to each other. Many of them will agree even though what they saw was completely different. Things like the halo effect, where a person making an initial assessment of another person, place, or thing will assume ambiguous information based upon concrete information. Or group conformity can have a huge influence on relying outside of your own consciousness to derive what is reality. Also, with me not being able to prove that I am not a brain in a vat being controlled by machines through a computer simulation, brings me to the conclusion that my senses may not be an accurate sense of reality. However, I must use my senses in order to navigate this world, and they have not failed me as of yet. Failed as in resulted in me dying. I may also point out that no one can prove that the way the world is presented to us is actually how it is. It is possible that our senses have evolved to make the world look a bit more beautiful in order to control our stress, when in reality we live in an ugly world filled with darkness and ugliness. Because of the things I mentioned above, I can't agree that my senses can in fact be a true representation of the reality around me. The knowledge my senses give to me may in fact be wrong. So I can agree that knowledge can be obtained through my senses, but whether or not that knowledge is true doesn't stem from the simple fact of me perceiving that information. If I was colorblind and needed to figure out which fruit I could eat based upon its ripeness, my vision would give me knowledge that is factually incorrect and may even lead me to death. I also don't believe that the proper moral purpose of one's life is the pursuit of one's own happiness or rational self-interest. This may be my own bias in that I believe in altruism, which I will get into later. This is a question that I don't think can be explained objectively. I don't think you can conflate one's own happiness to rational self-interest. Say, for instance, it makes me happy to give away all my earthly possessions and live in poverty. This wouldn't be good for my own rational self-interest, being defined by Rand as whatever leads to my existence versus non-existence. I suppose one could say that based upon Rand's philosophy, that would be an irrational action, and therefore my actions couldn't possibly be considered in accordance to happiness. Yet this is the problem that arises when one conflates the word happiness with rational self-interest. Happiness is described as an emotion, and according to Rand, emotions are not sources of knowledge. So the pursuit of one's own happiness couldn't possibly be the source for objective morality. In order for this tenet to be valid, you may have to do some things in which would make you unhappy, depending on the subjectivity of happiness. Let's say you are an obese person suffering from a curable disease if you lost weight and would result in death if you didn't. You are on a strict diet in order to lose the weight needed to ensure your existence. However, you see some of your favorite ice cream and you know that eating that ice cream would make you incredibly happy. Doing so would cause you to deter from your diet and increase the chance of you becoming non-existent. In this scenario, you have happiness as an emotion and rational self-interest as simply existence or non-existence put by Rand. What is the correct moral obligation? To eat the ice cream in the pursuit of your happiness, or to not eat the ice cream and increase your chances of existence? To me, neither of the outcomes really matter. You don't know how long you have to live. You could die in a car accident unrelated to your disease the next day. If you had chosen to eat the ice cream, does that change the fact that you died the next day due to something out of your control? You got to experience the happiness, but that happiness didn't conflict with the rational self-interest of existing, since that was done not to no fault of your own. When you are dead, your happiness doesn't matter, nor does the thought of your existence. Don't get me wrong, we should always act in ways that would prolong our own life. In the end, if you're dead, there's nothing beyond that. The uncertainty of the end of your life makes it hard for anyone to objectively set their morality based upon rational self-interest. It's impossible to know when we will die. If you had known that you were going to die the next day regardless of your actions, would you have chosen differently? Would you have chosen to eat the ice cream? The possibility of a future changes our outlooks. This is shown through game theory as well. When the time of cooperation ceasing ceasing with the other entity is unknown, it's in your rational self-interest to act as if you're always going to be playing the game with them, a game referring to game theory. It is in your best interest to cooperate for as long as the future is unknown. An easy thought experiment to test this is to ask yourself that if you knew if you were going to die tomorrow, would you still act the same as you did yesterday? Would you follow all the laws and rules of society? Would you continue on with your daily routine? More than likely not. I'm not saying you'd go around murdering people, but maybe you would speed home, or maybe you would blow through all of your savings. In the end, the shadow of the future has huge implications on your behavior. This is why many theists who believe in an afterlife and atheists have drastically different outlooks on life. Theists already know that they're going to have an afterlife. They know that this life will end, but they will continue to exist in a different sense after death. This puts an end goal on this planet for cooperation. Have you ever wondered why a Christian wouldn't care about taking care of the Earth's environment? This is one of the reasons. They know that Jesus is coming back at some point in the future. There will be an end to the existence of human beings on Earth. Earth is only temporary, so why would you care about the future of the planet or the generations after yourself? If you know for certain that they will end up in heaven or hell and that Earth is just a place to test your worthiness, why care about the planet beyond your time here? Why care about the plight of the poor? If you believe it's because of their own doing and that they will end up in heaven or hell, why care about their current state of affairs? It's only temporary, right? This idea that happiness is the only rational goal in life sets up a society that is only interested in what life can provide for the individual. It breaks down the reasons to cooperate with others. If you're only interested in your own happiness, how can you live within a society? A society is a group of people that live with each other in constant social interaction. Who would want to interact with somebody that they cannot trust? Who would want to interact with someone they knew would never think about anything beyond their own self-interest? How can you have deep, meaningful relationships with others with this mentality? Even if everyone acted in their own rational self-interest, there wouldn't be much of a reason to socially interact with others. We would all just be using each other as a means to an end. Could you call that a society? The next tenet is a precursor to the first, that the only social system consistent with its moral purpose is laissez-faire capitalism. Laissez-faire capitalism is defined as an economic system in which transactions between private parties are free from government interventions such as regulation, privileges, tariffs, and subsidies. First off, Rand confuses an economic system with a social system. This may be because she views most personal interactions with others no more than business in nature. The term social system is not really definable though. However, when I think of social systems, I think of how individuals interact and build relationships with each other. Capitalism is a system built upon the idea of private ownership of the means of production and the operation of them for profit. While capitalism may give a reason for people to interact, it's not necessarily indicative that one must build any relationships or really interact with others. For example, you could live outside of the city limits by yourself and only come to town in order to buy things. You can walk into a grocery store, pick up your items, check out, go back home without really having to interact with anyone socially. The system of capitalism doesn't include a social aspect in itself. The social aspect, if any, would be incredibly superficial and based upon a casual conversation about the goods being bought and sold. Sure, social systems can influence capitalism and vice versa, but I don't believe that capitalism itself is sufficient to call it a social system. I could be wrong, and if you think you can make the case, then go ahead in the comments below. When it comes to laissez-faire capitalism, I do not support it by any means. I am for the government implementing regulations on businesses, protecting workers' rights, and providing subsidies in certain circumstances. I oppose crony capitalism as well, but understand there are certain things the government must implement to make sure there is a level playing field for all businesses to enter and leave the market. I also believe that the state should have the right to create public entities that compete in the free market to offer a profit-free driven motive to citizens. So I more generally say I'm against corruption than crony capitalism. Corruption is the broader problem. I must also point out that I do not believe that the free market is even a possibility anymore. It's an illusion just like free will, but I still see the benefits of acting as if it was possible. So long as the collective isn't being destroyed by the interest of a few powerful individuals, it could bring about some positive benefits to the individual and the collective. So, if I don't think Rand is right in her belief that laissez-faire capitalism is the proper social system consistent with a moral philosophy, I should offer up my own suggestion. I do not have a complete answer for that just yet. However, I do know that the social system must have some basic tenets. I believe that it should be one that unifies all people underneath it. You could call me a globalist, but I align more with the term humanist. I think under the social system of everyone understanding that the primary goal of our collectivity should be the advancement of the human race overall, would help us create long-term solutions as a society. But in the same token, we must also build up the individual as being just as important. The individual collectively makes the whole, and when the individual falls short, it can hurt the collective. So we need a system that also builds up the individual without losing sight of the collective. There needs to be a balance between the two. They feed off of each other. This system would be based upon subjective moral philosophy created and continuously be improved by the collective. With advancements in our understanding of science and our environment, our moral philosophy should also coincide with those advancements. For example, the general consensus arising from the field of science is that free will may not exist, or not to the degree that we have built our entire understanding of the world around. Therefore, we should start changing our values and philosophies to match the current information we have. This is just a general idea of what I feel would be better than the tenets of objectivism. By no means are these my complete thoughts, because I'm still formulating them. The world is still changing and evolving into something different every day. Who knows what challenges we face today will be the challenges of tomorrow. I just hate it when someone knocks down an idea but then offers nothing up to replace that idea. In general, I also agree that philosophy is incredibly important. Overall, Rand felt that philosophy is important only because it is necessary for living a good human life and creating a world conducive to living such a life. Philosophy supplies the most fundamental cognitive and normative abstractions which, respectively, identify and evaluate what is. She believes that everyone is guided by a philosophy, and when they are on the correct one, they will be successful. Philosophy helps us understand the reason why we believe the things we do and why we think what we do. It allows us to ask important questions that may seem silly at first, but after deliberation, you realize how much of your life is built upon that central concept. If that concept is wrong, what do you do? When it comes to Objectivism's epistemology, I have a problem with how it uses axioms. An axiom is a proposition that defeats its opponent by the fact that they have to accept it and use it in the process of any attempt to deny it. That is true to an extent if we're going to be talking about something that isn't really established fact, like philosophy, then yes, you do. Or if you're trying to break down how someone has truly come to their beliefs, then you must accept their reasoning in order to follow it. However, I do not have to accept that the axiom when they are trying to establish fact or truth. If your axiom is built upon something demonstrably false, I will stop the conversation there until we've tackled that problem. I cannot go down your rabbit hole, nor give you much else beyond that axiom, nor give anything beyond that axiom any merit if it is built upon a false premise. For example, we're having a discussion about biology, and one's axiom is that the size of one's brain determines how intelligent one is. From this conclusion, they feel women have smaller brains and therefore must be less intelligent. I cannot give the statement that women are less intelligent any credit if I know that the size of a human brain isn't necessarily predictive of intelligence. I cannot grant your axiom any validity if I want to have an honest discussion and talk about anything built upon that axiom. It would be fruitless. I could knock down all your beliefs in reverse and get you to question the axiom, though, or I could question the axiom outright. Both approaches would be valid, but they do not require me to accept your axiom. Is it possible to have good reasoning and logic built upon a faulty axiom? Of course. Religion is a prime example of this. One may believe in God and also evolution. Their axiom of God existing doesn't necessarily invalidate their claim that evolution is happening. However, I would prefer that their axiom be built upon something empirical, but they at least have concluded that evolution is happening, and creationism doesn't fit the evidence we have. One of the biggest things that breaks down objectivism is that it's built upon the idea that we humans have free will. If free will as a concept becomes obsolete, then its entire philosophy comes crashing down. As I have stated earlier, I do not believe in free will, so therefore I cannot take objectivism seriously, just as I can't take many religions seriously because they're also based upon the concept of free will. I cannot discern what ideas of mine are actually mine and not just a mirror of the information my brain has received. This is kind of how I view will in a general sense. Sam Harris demonstrates this by his thought experiment on naming a city.
Run a little experiment. Think of a city anywhere in the world. You can choose any city you want. And now, of course, I could have primed you. I could have artfully placed cues in my speech in the last few minutes that would make you more likely to think of Las Vegas, for instance. So just to be on the safe side, don't pick Vegas. But pick a city, any city, and just pay attention to what this conscious process is like. Now, the first thing to notice about this is as free a decision as you are ever going to make in your life. Okay, you have all the cities in the world to choose from, and I'm just asking you to pick one. Now, several cities have probably occurred to you, and just focus on one. So everybody got a city? All right, well, I'm sorry to say that you all picked the wrong city. Don't ask me how I know this, but I do. So I just want you to do this again, just so you can see what the process is like. Pick another city, can't be the first, and notice what that experience is like. Okay. Did you see any evidence for free will? Now, we better be able to find it here. I mean, if it's not here, it's not anywhere. So let's look for it. First, let's set aside all those cities whose names you don't know and therefore could not have picked. Okay, because you couldn't have picked one of those if your life depended on it. There's no freedom in that, obviously. Okay, and then there are many other cities whose names are quite well known to you, but which simply didn't occur to you to pick. I mean, for instance, perhaps Cairo didn't occur to you. You absolutely know that Cairo is a city, but for whatever reason, your Cairo circuits were not engaged. Okay, as a matter of neurophysiology, Cairo was not in the cards. So I want you to think about this. Were you free to choose that which did not occur to you to choose? Based on the state of your brain a few moments ago, Cairo was not coming. Okay, where is the freedom in that? Of course, if you did think of Cairo, you should consider yourself a genius. Now, so you probably thought of several cities, and then let's say you thought of Paris and New York and Tokyo. Okay, and then you thought, I love Paris. I'm going to go with Paris. And the last minute you thought, no, Tokyo, I'll go with Tokyo. And now this is the sort of decision that motivates the idea of free will. You've got two or more choices, and you're picking between them, and it's just you and your thoughts. There's no coercion from the external world. You are doing it, apparently. But when you look closely, I think you'll find that you are in no position to know why you picked what you picked. In this case, why you chose Tokyo over Paris. I mean, you might have some additional story to tell about it. You might think, well, I had Japanese food last night, and so I remembered it, and I picked Tokyo. Now, of course, we know from psychology that these kinds of stories are rather often false. Whenever people are manipulated in a lab, they always have some tale to tell about why they did what they did, and it never bears any relationship to the actual variables that cause them to behave that way. So if you give people, you can cause people to like one person more than another, or to cooperate more in economic games by simply giving them a hot beverage to hold as opposed to a cold one. And they never tell you that the reason they were biased as they were was because of the temperature of the cup in their hands. Okay, psychology is replete with evidence that we are very poor judges of why it is retrospectively, why it is we do what we do. But even if you're right in this instance, okay, even if your choice of Tokyo over Paris is based on your memory of having Japanese food last night, okay, you still can't explain why you remembered having Japanese food last night, or why the memory had the effect that it did. Why didn't it have the opposite effect? Why didn't you think, well, I just had Japanese food last night, so let's go with something new, let's go with Paris? The thing to notice about this is that you, as the conscious witness of your inner life, are not making these decisions. You can only witness these decisions. I mean, you no more picked the city you settled on in subjective terms than you would have if I picked it for you. I mean, so there was this first moment. I said, pick a city. And there's this hiatus where nothing has occurred to you. And then the names of cities start to get promoted into consciousness for reasons you can't inspect. And you can't choose the cities you think of before you think of it. I mean, it's almost like me saying Tel Aviv, Vancouver, Paris, and you simply hearing the words in consciousness. So if you pay attention to how thoughts and intentions arise and how decisions get made moment to moment, I think you can see that there's no evidence for free will, that actually our experience in life is compatible with the truth of determinism.
My ability to decide on a city cannot be boiled down to anything I consciously decided. Also, I'm limited to the cities that I know of, which means I did not have the ability to choose any city I had no knowledge of. I was limited in my choices by my own ignorance. I have no will to choose what is not known to me, even if it does exist. I am still limited in my use of whatever will I have. Even if I had the ability to know every city in the world, my decision would be influenced by my experience in my past that I have no control over. Say, for instance, I chose Big Arm, Montana. This city is completely obscure and not widely known. Why would I choose it? Because it sounded funny. Well, in that case, my decision wasn't my own per se. It was coerced by how much I found it funny, which in return made me put more attention on it. Well, what if you chose it because you knew no one would have ever had thought about it? Still, your decision is being influenced by trying to impress others. The goal is coercing your thoughts towards that city. What if you picked it because you grew up and you were familiar with it? Your familiarity drove your decision to choose that city, not necessarily you. Basically view all people as robots with information being constantly loaded into their programs. All their thoughts derive from the information that is put in, and this results in the action outputs. A robot cannot act in a manner that deals with information they do not have in their programming, or the ability to receive information if they do not have a complete array of senses to collect the data. Even then, a program must exist for the robot to interpret the data being collected. If you were to ask a robot to tell you how they feel today and they responded with great, would you think it had free will? Why do we do the same when it comes to humans? If a robot is programmed to only do a certain task and it never does anything else, we understand programming is determining its behavior. Why do we not also apply the same thought to human beings? Robots have the ability to make choices, but those choices are limited by its programming, or in other terms, their knowledge. Does this mean robots have free will as well? Is it possible for robots to achieve free will? If not, then what are the factors that inhibit this? I believe robots will never have free will because humans never had it to begin with. It's an illusion. The above situation leads me to believe in what's called soft determinism. We all act according to the events in our past. Those things determine our future actions. However, this doesn't explain how some people can change. This is where the soft comes in. I believe that change happens when that person is introduced to a new environment that feeds it new information. It then has more choices or knowledge to choose from. This can explain how some people achieve the rags to riches stories we often hear about, or how a Nazi suddenly deconverts. But these changes are determined by the new information being presented or fed into us. When it comes to Objectivism's ethics, I disagree wholeheartedly. I do not think rational self-interest is what we should build a system of ethics on. Game theory helps us understand why it doesn't make sense to continue to act in such a manner. People will be less willing to cooperate with you, and thus your ability to survive substantially decreases. It's all about a balance between both parties, with the shadow of the future being infinite, the latter being the most important part. We cooperate as citizens because we do not know when our country will cease to exist. If we did, why would we cooperate as citizens? I do agree with Rand that we as humans must always be on the journey for knowledge. We are given brains with the ability to use logic and reason to obtain information from the world around us and manipulate it. When we stop thinking, we stop living. And when we stop trying to improve ourselves, or at least the environment around us, what is the point of life? One of the best ways to do so is always seeking knowledge. The world constantly changes, and to think you know everything you need to know shows just how much you don't. I know this is a kind of long video, but I really wanted to dive into why I don't agree with Objectivism and provide the evidence. I wanted to make sure people could easily understand my ideas that I presented. Hopefully, you've enjoyed my journey into Ayn Rand so far. I will also be making a video about my views on her atheism and politics soon. Please like, share, and subscribe. Leave your comments below and give me a like if you enjoyed this. Take care.